Now, every single day, Dove, you know, we get a feeling that besides big talk, the West is beginning to prepare for a changed world order. And every week, more and more people are actually, their stand is becoming either ambiguous or they are moving towards a greater sympathy for Russia. It's quite clear here, NATO is hapless and helpless out here. You know, the US President, UK Prime Minister, whole NATO brigade this week, Dove, they landed in Belgium for this extraordinary session. And this meeting actually served as the perfect blow to this illusion. They could do nothing. They could do nothing, Dove. So are we moving towards a new world order right now? America's role will come under question, sorry.
Well, couple of things. First, I totally disagree with you on NATO and the United States. We're destroying the Russian economy. By the way, I am really shocked, it's the only way I can put it, that India, which claims to be neutral and sympathetic, at least to the humanitarian crisis, is negotiating a deal with Russia for 12 Su-30 aircraft right now as we speak. I am absolutely shocked. Not only that, the Financial Times, which is not an American newspaper, has said that this is going to be a rupee for ruble deal. Now, come on. You're accusing NATO of being weak? What is India doing? That's number one. Number two, the sanctions have been hurting, and you say Russia's advancing? Russia isn't advancing at all. Not only that, the Ukrainians blew up a Russian ship. They're knocking out Russian tanks. They're knocking out Russian aircraft. I was speaking to a Russian yesterday who said, oh, we control the skies. What nonsense. They're shooting them down. They weren't even supposed to have an air force by now. So please, ARNAB, we can disagree, but let's stick to the facts.
Okay, I'll let Daria and others respond to you. I shall only respond to you very briefly to your unnecessary attack on India. I do not understand anymore, and it's becoming frustrating that any discussion regarding this war becomes a discussion on India. Well, I will say it one more time to you, Dove. India is going to take care of India. India is going to look after India's interests. And our economy is growing 3 times the pace or 4 times the pace of the American economy. More and more Americans are living under the poverty line. They are not able to make ends meet, right? And more Indians are rising economically. And please, this is not our war. Dove, you are the ones with the biolabs in Ukraine. You are the ones, you know, Joe Biden's sons was doing all kinds of business in Ukraine. You are vested in Ukraine. You are pushing Ukraine. You are encouraging Ukraine. And yesterday, your president went and said, listen, Zelensky, if you want to give up territory, it's your choice. Listen, Zelensky, if you want to break up your country and give a little bit of it to Russia, it's your choice. You have hung the Ukrainians out to dry, Dove, and how dare you question India all the time? You've hung them out to dry.
Well, we've hardly hung them out to dry, considering we're providing them more arms.
You're just saying go fight to the last Ukrainian.
Over $2.5 billion of assistance. How much have you guys given? The whole world considers Mr.
We've given humanitarian aid. It's your war.
Aggressor.
It's your war. We'd rather give them food than weapons. By giving them weapons, you are driving them further down into greater difficulty.
Oh, really? You would rather have the Russians massacre every Ukrainian?
I want Daria to come into this.
All right. I've made my point. You've made yours.
Yes. Thank you. This is very interesting discussion that we have tonight. It shows the two different approach for the destiny of countries, as we see it on the example of India, for example, when my American colleague was saying that India has no right to do something. This is the total, exactly the American way of thinking about the world. That some countries, that America thinks that this country can dictate its own rules to the other countries, to India, to Ukraine, to other countries, whenever they are, to Europe. But the thing is that this world order is in the past. And Mr. ARNAB, I thank you for also quoting and mentioning the topic about the biolaboratories. US is not doing this biological epidemiological researches inside America, but it's putting everywhere in the world the points where there are the biolabs which are working on the BL4 level of the importance. So that means that these biolabs are working with quite epidemiological high threats. And the thing is that US is trying to stay in this world order of unipolarity and to dictate to the other states what to do, as they were trying to dictate to Russia. So Russia didn't agree with that, and we made our historical choice. United States tried to dictate how to behave to Ukraine, and it led to the disaster. It caused this catastrophe, and it starts to dictate to Europe how to behave. But this is not possible. The world is multipolar. Every country, every civilizational bloc has its own right for its own policy, and Russians and Americans doesn't have a right to dictate. We need to let the world be multipolar. This is my statement. This is my thoughts.
John, you know, maybe this is a post-colonial world that, and it's been too many years since the World War II, which the West is not beginning to get accustomed to, and especially given the economic advances of nations, the economic and military advances of nations over the last couple of decades, particularly. I think that what's happening here is that the aspiration of several large and significant countries to be powers in their own right and not part of any bloc is something which the West is not being able to tolerate. But India, China, Russia, these are large countries. Yes. They have a long history. And I think the West must reconcile to the way several countries have grown in the last few decades. And for countries like Georgia, I'm sure for countries like Ukraine, it is time to realize that just getting used by America is going to do them no good, because the New World Order cannot be denied anymore. I'm not talking about the morality of the Russian invasion. Don't get me wrong, Maxim. I believe that much of what Russia is doing is morally wrong. The kind of attacks that there have been on civilians, the casualties, is morally wrong. But if you look at a larger perspective, then a pure survey of the world speaks for itself. For example, Assad is visiting the UAE while bin Zayed says that we will bolster Russia. 40 countries did not toe the American line at the UNGA. There is a serious bloc emerging between China and Russia, right? And Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, all deepening ties with Russia. Oil exporting countries, OPEC is with Russia. So America has completely failed to isolate Russia. It may equally be victor because nobody is afraid of America anymore. America's heyday is over. America's sphere of influence is being questioned. North Korea is testing ICBMs. Iran has undermined American sanctions. American sanctions have completely and utterly failed against Iran. Am I right? Am I wrong? Mr. Professor Marandi is there in Tehran. He's joining us today.
Yes, I agree completely. And I think we have to keep in mind a point that you mentioned earlier. I, too, am very much against war. When the United States wanted to invade Iraq, I participated in the anti-war rallies in London and in Birmingham, in England, even though I despised Saddam Hussein. But the problem was that the United States did not have the legitimate right to invade Saddam Hussein. So I don't like the war in Ukraine, but we have to keep in mind that the United States has been invading, and NATO countries, country after country, Iraq, Libya, what we're seeing, the genocide in Yemen, the continued occupation of huge parts of Syria. And then, yes, of course, the list goes on. And then on the other hand, when we look at Europe, after the Cold War, there was an opportunity for the whole of Europe to come together. What did the United States do? They lied to the Russians. They said that we won't expand eastward, and they did. For what purpose? Russia wanted desperately to become a part of Europe. I would say pathetically so. I mean, it was just too much. But still, they tried to undermine Russia. Then as they went eastwards, then the coup in Ukraine, the biolabs, as pointed out, the support for Nazi groups, the same thing that they did in Syria, the same thing that they did in Nicaragua by supporting those Contra-fascists. In Nicaragua, they supported ISIS and Al-Qaeda, the same extremist terrorists that now they're supporting in Ukraine. Obviously, all of Ukraine is not Nazi, but neither was Syria. These groups are so vicious that they intimidate the rest of society. So when the United States is constantly invading country after country, when it is trying to provoke countries like Russia or undermine countries like Russia, how in the world do Western countries and NATO countries expect us to have any sympathy for them? And then to get to the final point that you pointed out, when the United States and the Europeans cannot undermine Iran, they failed in their maxim. They targeted women and children with the most brutal sanctions possible. They failed. Look at Iran today. It is growing more powerful by the day, ironically, because of the conflict in Ukraine. Suddenly everyone is turning to Iran. But they failed to undermine Iran. Do they think they're going to undermine Russia, which is far larger than Iran, which has a larger population than Iran? So the United States and the Europeans, their mentality is still the mentality of the past. They feel that they're exceptional. But the world sees things differently, and the world also sees the United States and the Europeans as not being nearly as strong as they used to be. So I think what is happening is that the United States and the Europeans, by pursuing these policies, they are quickening the relative decline of the Eurocentric global order.
It's happening very fast out here. I completely agree with you. I think look, the number of countries that are actually, taking on this whole American approach. Even Bangladesh, by the way, Dov, even Bangladesh is saying, to hell with all the pressure from America and NATO. We are going to do business with Russia. We are building a nuclear power plant with Russia. We are going to continue to build the nuclear power plant with Russia. We'll do business in nuclear power with Russia. They basically, even Bangladesh has said, to hell with the Americans, to hell with NATO. And doesn't that reflect something, Dov? Everybody is saying that now.
No, it's not everybody, Arnab, and you know it. Look at the vote in the General Assembly again. By the way, this nonsense that we pressured countries to join NATO. Countries ask to join NATO. They ask every time. And I don't know that Iran is getting that much stronger or that much better or that much more economically strong. And if you look at Russia, what's happened already, stock market closes for a month. Ruble is worth, what, 15% of what it was not all that long ago? The Russians are begging people to trade in rubles because they can't afford to do anything else. As you already heard, the biggest plant that produces cars in Russia can't do anything because it doesn't have, you know what, the American semiconductors or the European semiconductors. This nonsense. And the biological tests, I mean, what are you talking about here? Nobody seems to be talking about the fact that Russians have invaded Ukraine, that the Ukrainians are begging for more and more equipment, that they are fighting in a way that nobody expected, that they are defending their homeland. You want to take morality out of politics? Fine, take morality out of politics and then go ahead and kill whoever you want to kill. Take over any country that you want. I understand that most countries want to protect their sovereignty. But evidently there are some people like in Moscow who think
there's a big echo, Anand. You need to fix this.
This is absolute nonsense. And I think that it looks like on this particular program,
look at Yemen, look at Libya, look at the sanctions on Venezuela.
Professor Marandi knows the situation in Iran better, but let me just tell you this. Today, Dov, I'll tell you, you're very, very frustrated today, very frustrated. And to be honest, if I were in your shoes today, I'd be very frustrated too. I mean, look at how you...
The sanctions have continued. The pressure on Russia continues. The Ukrainians are fighting back. They're blowing up Russian tanks. They're shooting down Russian aircraft. They're blowing up Russian ships. They're destroying Russian facilities. That's not the United States. That's Ukraine. So, look, Arnab, you can look at it the way you want to look at it, but I don't think the reality agrees with you.
Where are you getting all this from? You've been seeing too many American movies.
Not at all. Not in the least. You've been seeing too many Russian movies.
Victor, the Americans believe everything is going their way. When this is done and dusted, Putin will be out of a job. Russia will see a regime change. China will be diminished. India will coolly and calmly listen to whatever Biden is saying. That's the reality that they are living in. The reality that I live in is where even Iran did not get affected by their sanctions. Yeah, Victor, would you like to come in?
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is Victor Gao. Before I answer your very important question, let me just share my view with my American panelists. Do you know how to deal with a country like India, a great country, a very long civilization, one of the largest populations in the world? Let me share with you my view. Always deal with India with respect. Treat India as an equal. Respect India's independence of decision-making. Don't try to impose your view onto India. Why? Because the Indian people will simply not accept that, because they are a great people with their own brains, and don't impose your brain onto them. Now, as for the future of the world, I think the future of the world will be multilateral, rallied around the United Nations. And the fact that Russia, China, the United States, UK, and France are the 5 permanent member states of the United Nations Security Council is because of what they did in defeating Nazi Germany in the Second World War and in defeating Japanese fascism in Asia in the Second World War. I think this structure so far has prevented the outburst of another world war. We should be happy about this. I'm worried when I hear President Zelensky mentioning if he cannot meet with President Putin of Russia, there will be the Third World War. We don't want to be hijacked by this kind of threat of a Third World War. Third World War will serve no one's interest. I don't want to see America, China, Russia, United Kingdom, all the NATO member states destroyed in the Third World War. The Third World War will be a nuclear war. Mankind has never been as close to the brink of a nuclear war as we are now. So de-escalate, and de-escalate. The United States need to take the leadership role to de-escalate rather than pouring more fuel on the fire in Ukraine. This so-called sanctions, do the sanctions hurt the Russians? Of course they do. Do you think the sanctions will manhandle Russia down to the ground and force Russia to call uncle? No, never. If you indulge in the fantasy that the sanctions will force Russia to surrender, you completely misunderstand and underestimate the will and the resources of Russia. Russia will kick around, and Russia will be a very important party on the global scene. Allow me to emphasize, there will be no lasting peace in Europe by excluding Russia. There will be no lasting peace in the world by excluding Russia. And on top of that, to exclude Russian culture is a shame, because Tchaikovsky, Dostoevsky, all these guys, all these shining examples, they are not only examples of Russian civilization, they are shining examples of mankind civilization. Let's deal with Russia and the Russian people with respect. If anyone wants to humiliate Russia and humiliate the Russian people, they will do this at their own peril. And Russia will remain one of the 5 permanent member states of the United Nations Security Council. And this is a fact that the United States and all NATO member states need to acknowledge rather than completely disregard. And try to impose sanctions to force Russia to the ground will completely fail miserably.
Jitendra.